Okay, so today we are going to uh, talk about task analysis and the steps before designing an application or the system. How are we going to gather requirements? It's a typical software engineering issue where we collect uh, requirements, customize them, fit them to our needs, fit them to technical limitations, make iterations, and end up with the system design. Then we then we start coding, and on the way we also change it, uh, and that is the fundamental structure of the agile software development. So how do we proceed? So I'm going to talk about that. Um, we will be talking about requirement gathering, requirement collection process. Then we will talk about task analysis, and probably next week we will talk about interface evaluation. So developers, let me, this is the user and this is developer. So as you see, um, the need must be fulfilled by the designer, but it's not always the same. Therefore, we have the process of understanding users and getting requirements from the users. And typically, we have a lot of users, but we can only get information from part of the users. Sometimes one, sometimes many, but not all of the users. So we will be doing part of the population. And we will be understanding why, what, and how. And we will be answering these questions. Usually, we start with observation and explanation analysis. We try to understand motivation, and we will be talking about the user, the ethnographic properties of the user, and related issues. So in order to understand what we are going to be doing, we should keep in mind that we are building systems for other people, not for personal use. So one of the pitfalls of developing with Python as far as I can see, you develop programs for yourself, not for others. So almost all the programs developed by Python that I am seeing in student projects are run by the students themselves. Nobody else can run it because they don't understand. It doesn't have any kind of menu or user interface. So, but generally, when we are building systems, we are doing for others, not for ourselves. So that is quite important. Our goal will be building a system that performs the task X. It can do it, such as collecting applications for scholarship. Collecting applications for scholarship is fine, but is it good? Is it a good application? So how do we define the success? When are we satisfied? So these are important questions. As we develop applications and systems, we have real-world constraints and engineering constraints. We cannot do everything. We have resources, we have computational resources, we have camera resolution, battery problems, CPU, etc. Computational complexity. Therefore, we cannot do everything. And we have to consider the environment where the system will be used, depending on user characteristics and tasks to perform the goal, that is task X. So in order to move forward, we have to understand what the task is, what is going to happen. So we have to break it down to smaller components. These are typically important things in software engineering. This is kind of human-computer interaction side of it, but it's extremely important in software engineering. So real-world constraints, additional real-world constraints are like time pressure, cost, and developer time, size, power in terms of electricity and CPU, price, computer power, memory, related to cost. And when you have a product already, it has to carry on the old features. So that is trying to keep the consistency with the product line. Similarly, backward compatibility, and also having different properties so that it will not look like a competitor. You have to provide new features. You have to change it a little bit so that it will behave differently. People will understand, people will believe that it's better. So in order to understand what to do, we have to understand the task, the job. In order to understand the job, the task, we have to make data available to us. That will be done through interviews, observation, surveys and questionnaires, reading the existing documentation and sometimes legislations, and also interesting technique that we call immersion. Sitting in the chair of the actual person. Then we will take notes. We write down small cards. We talk about that. We talk about task and what's going to happen. And we will use prototyping tools. We will use brainstorming tools, mind mapping tools to organize data. Then we are going to make lists, outline, matrices to explain the task. If you don't explain, if you don't write it down, if you don't organize the task, your application will fail. Somehow, you need to organize it. That's one of the reasons that we ask initial designs in graduation projects, because we want you to organize requirements and things to do. Otherwise, at the end of the semester, there will be disagreement between the professor and the student because requirements are not set carefully. It could be straight explanation, like narrative, like a story, or it could be graphs, hierarchical flowcharts, any kind of drawing. So if you are good with writing, then use narratives. But if you cannot write very well, you prefer to draw things and classify things and make hierarchical diagrams, then go for it, or both. Both is better. But try to write something, try to make documentation, try to make some design. Don't keep things in your brain because it is elastic. Things that you keep in your brain changes. So generally, draw a flowchart to represent a task. this will be transferred to the application or the system. So in order to transfer it, you need to know it. And in order to know it, you need to write it down. And this is what it is. But how are we going to do it? Such as a task is given for an operation in municipality, in belediye, like accepting certain amount of payment for some task, for something. So there are signatures, customers, and person, workers, managers. Something is going to happen. So in order to be able to design something for that people, you need to understand and study activities, things that are related to activities and relations between the people. So if you don't pay attention to the people and the activities that they do, your application will fail or will not be as good. So it is not only computer system oriented, it is also people oriented. You need to understand what they are doing, who they are, etc. So also study related processes and objects in the environment that people may use, such as breaks, such as smoking breaks, lunch, okay, or some tea. These kind of things, or asking questions to somebody else and losing the focus, or customer coming in losing the focus because you have to serve to the customer to look at something else. One of the interesting things in Siemens health application, in one of the famous hospitals next to our campus, John Hopkins Anadolu Hastanesi, they were using the application from the Siemens, and when they first install it, front desk operators are complained a lot because there was one important failure. That is, there is a hospital registration screen. They get registered, and when they want to pay, they say, the customer or the patient say, their credit card is in the car. So since their credit card is in the car, the front desk operator says, okay, I will wait. Go get the card from the car. But since the application expects to complete the task and does not allow a second window to open for the next patient waiting in the line, they had to sit and wait. And next customer is waiting, the guy is waiting because the person is going to get his or her card from the car. So later, the company changed it so that you can open a new window, serve the next customer, and when the other customer comes in, switch the windows and continue for the other. In the initial case, the operator has to delete everything at the very last step because there was no way to move forward. And when the credit card comes back, they have to fill every information from the beginning in the version 1. So apparently they didn't study how payments and patients are moving in the hospital carefully. They thought once the guy is in the line, it's going to finish. But when you observe the field, that is not the case. Therefore, we also study office environment, papers, whiteboards, telephones, paper counting machines in the banks. Again, cigarette breaks, etc. So all of them are related. Phone calling, etc. Therefore, what we do is we go and observe the field. If it is Aras Cargo, we observe the cargo company or a competitor company. If it is the system for the Migros, we observe the system, existing work. If it is not computerized at all, for example, warehouse, which is not computerized yet, you go there, there is a warehouse, you go there and observe what is happening, who is doing what. Then you try to focus observable behaviors, like what are the practices, what are the methods, what people are doing. It is not just by looking at the legislation, or you can make your own logic in the office as a programmer or as a designer. That doesn't fit. Sometimes you see interesting parks in interesting cities, small cities, towns in Turkey, which are totally unsuitable for the particular small town in Anatolia. And I do a lot of times, and I ask myself, why did they do it? Why did they put such an ugly and not fitting, unsuitable park in this town? And later I realized that the design of those parks are standard somewhere in Ankara, somewhere in Istanbul, some company and some designer on the computer draws, here is the road for the pedestrians, here is the pool, here is the trees, etc. So it looks like very nice park on the computer screen in the 3D rendering, etc. But when they do it on the field, it's ugly. Why? Because they didn't study it. They didn't study the local factors. So that's important. One of the architects that I met, it's a private architect, very famous guy, who has been building single family homes, villas, for the rich people, said, before I design a villa for a family, I visit them 3 days, including nights, and observe their behavior. Observe how they eat, how they talk, how they interact with themselves, how they go to bathroom, etc. Then I design the house according to their behaviors. So that's a very good design methodology for architects, observing what people are doing, because every family is different. Therefore, if you know the family and you are going to design something for them, you need to understand them. You need to understand their needs and their behaviors. Similar things are valid for software architects, because software architects are also important, maybe more important than physical architects in terms of how you speed up and make the life easier. So learn what users do, why they do it, how they do it, when they do it, with what tools or people do it. Our new design system may change some of the behaviors, especially how things will be done. Therefore, they may not like it. Some tasks will be eliminated. And sometimes once you start understanding additional information can be obtained for further enhancing the task, eliminating unnecessary operations, etc. So trying to understand users not only help you to design the interface and the flow, but also you may want to change the application through the functions so that you can make a better product. It can lead deeper knowledge. And the methods for that is learning by doing. First thing is learning by doing. The famous UPS tablet designer, UPS delivery guys have tablets on them along with them, and you sign it. Today, the cargo guys still have papers trying to get your social security number, TC number, etc. on a paper, and you sign it sometimes. But UPS developed a tablet for it years ago and totally automated it without paper. Fine. How did they do it? The guy who designed that software, including the software, worked as a delivery person for 2 months. The developer worked as a delivery person on the street with the truck 2 months, learned the task, then designed something for it. So that is one strategy, learning by doing. So that is extremely useful when you are designing an application for an industrial factory, some ERP software, etc. Also, it improves the interaction between the company and the developer for the requirement gathering process, and also observing what's going to happen. So for that reason, some software companies put the developer staff into the customer's location. So when you are developing an application for the bank, software company moves to the bank. When they are developing an application for an industrial factory in Gebze, for example, people are moved to Gebze and the factory gives them the meeting room to work for 3 months or 6 months. For 6 months, their work location is the factory. They can observe potential users. They can observe what is happening in the company. And also, as a bonus, they can organize meetings in much better, efficient way. So learning by doing and going to the customer's location is very important for big projects. For smaller projects, going there for 1 day or 2 days and observing and coming back is more practical. Observation can be done. So I will suggest you to observe computer users in student registration office, computer users in banks, computer users in shops, point of sale terminal users, barcode reader users, mobile application users. So try to observe people. As you observe people, you will understand what the problems, you will start understanding what the problems are. And if we are developing an application for specific task or specific task alternative application, like a banking application, try to observe existing operation. Sometimes we ask person to speak up as they are using so that we can gather more information. So that is what we say thinking out loud. Or we can sit and chat with the user. As we are using it, we can sit and chat. I will come back to that later. We can do interviews. We can ask questions. We can set focus groups. We can call people and discuss. We can study documentation. This is extremely important if you are developing an application for the school registration system. For the school registration system or tax system, there are legislations and rules. So those are the documentation part. So try to understand the documentation so that your application will be implementing the documentation. Not only the documentation, but you need to study it because you have to obey to the documentation if it is legislation. And also, if there are competitors, you need to look at the competitive products so that it will be more competitive. So we observe users, we get data from users. That is what we call interpretive analysis. We can do first, we can do experiments. We can ask them to do certain things and collect data. If we cannot collect data, we observe. Both of them are experiments. Interpretive analysis experiments, if you don't measure that much just by explanation, it could be subjective, but it's okay. Since it's concerned with humans, no 100% reality is assured, but it gives some information. So even if we explain things in certain way, it will give you an idea. For example, same thing can be explained in multiple ways with two different political parties. Same thing. Let them explain the same behavior, same phenomena. You will end up with two different answers. But it is still helpful for certain things. When you are doing the experiment, we try to understand why and how people are doing certain things in certain ways. We do laboratory experiments, but laboratory experiments are not exactly replicas of the real life. It is a controlled environment. There are no customers, etc. So for some things it's good, but for other things, lab is not as good. We cannot control all the variables in the lab. Context is neglected, and tasks are usually short, not all day. You can sit and watch the actual user all day or multiple days. You can observe the person 1 month in order to come up with a solution to the person. But in the lab, you can call and the experiment can at most take 2 hours. After 2 hours, they leave. So these kind of interpretive analysis methods exist. One is the ethnography, that is our main focus. Contextual inquiry is more specific from ethnography with the focus on asking questions. So you are directing with inquiries. Then this is nice and happy, generally often equated with ethnography, but it's field study. You go there and do the job. You don't observe it, you do it, fine. That's also possible. And this is also famous, observational, much more informal, just watching users without asking questions. But without asking questions, it's also nice. Sometimes you can place a camera, record the video, and you record the video all day long and watch it later. That leaves some freedom to the user, because if you wait next to the user, they cannot behave so naturally because somebody is watching them. But if it's a camera watching them, it's more relaxing. But try to explain the users you are not watching them for their performance, you are watching them for the software performance. If they feel that they are being measured, okay, this is important. If they feel they are being measured, they don't behave naturally. They feel that they are in an examination, and that is very wrong, incorrect. Therefore, try to you should explain the users before observation, indicating that I am watching the application and your struggle against the application. So you will be anonymous. I am not measuring your performance, I am measuring the interface. So any failure you do is very helpful for us because we are trying to improve the user interface and the system. So we will be writing the version 2 of it. So at the end also, you will ask questions to, do you have anything to say? Can we improve the application in any kind of way? And they start talking. They try to give some suggestions, and they are very valuable. Ethnographic study is highly dependent on context, Bağlam. Therefore, you observe person in their context. If it is the Aras Kargo, you go to Aras Kargo and watch them in their context. It's totally different. If you go to a hospital, it's different. So jargon is different. The behavior of people are different to each other, etc. Also, the environment is different. Desks and computers, quality of computers, monitors, price of the computers are different, etc. However, you collect data, but interpretation of data is important. As I said, if give the same data to two different parties, political parties, they will end up with two completely different explanations. So good interpretation is essential. And the behaviors are only meaningful in the context. Otherwise, many behaviors are irrelevant. So the idea is get into working environment of the user. This is the result. And when you do that, your interpretation is important rather than data from the field. That is what actually matters. And therefore, you need to be experienced, you need to be somewhat objective about this interpretation. Okay, so let's give about 10 minutes break. So let's come back in this. Okay, let me go to department first. Okay, I'm back. Oradasınız değil mi?
Buradayız hocam.
Ekran geliyor mu?
Ekran gözükmüyor şu an.
Ekranda ya da sadece bende geldi.
Geldi hocam.
Tamam. Ekran uyumuş. Ekran uyuyunca çıkmış. Tablet bağlantısı kesilmiş. Second screen bağlantısı. So our objective is to understand users, understand goals and values of the user, understand individuals' interactions within the culture, with the company culture. Try to make closed knowledge open. Tacit means closed. And trying to do this in an unbiased fashion, unlike the political parties in the campaign time, explaining things in their own way, try to do it in an unbiased fashion, in an objective, scientific fashion, as much as possible. For user interface designers, improve system by finding problems in the way it is currently being used. For example, when you are trying to explain the problems with the accommodation of Linux in the corporate environment, if you are biased for Windows or for macOS, you will say a lot of bad things about bad observations. You will note down bad observations about Linux operating system, and you will skip the positive sides or some sides that you don't want to talk about. So it's impossible to eliminate it 100% because everybody has some kind of bias, but try to make it as low as possible. How are we going to do it then? You go and watch. You do recording and you do interviews. So as a person writing down observations of the monkeys and gorillas, spending time with gorillas is required, and many scientists and do we say zoologists? Zoologists with interest in gorillas did that and had a very successful explanations in their behaviors, their language, etc. They stay together with the animals. But observation is the key. Carefully observe everything about users and their environment. Think about describing it to someone else who has never seen it, so that writing that down that way is significant. Also, taking the video is critical. Also, not only the words, but also behaviors must be noted. So non-verbal details like seems didn't like it, yeah, closed the eyes, looked somewhere else, hesitated. So those kind of behaviors, housed, are important cues for evaluating the users, not only the verbs. Structure and the language used in the work, group actions, culture, and aspects of the work are important things to note because task itself is already described somewhere. It's also easy to describe and write. mm, you can write it down, but for the evaluation part, for observation part, more details can be accommodated. That are the group actions, individual actions, culture, etc. So those are important considerations, such as rooms, artifacts in the business, work standards, relationships between the people, manager relationships, signatures, etc., customers in the room, size of the room, crowd, all those are interesting. Talking about the software with the employees is a good strategy. Have some list of questions, like 10 questions. But towards the end, let them talk. Let them give some additional information, and those informations are also good. Create interpretations together with the users. So try to encourage them to explain the problems. Try to encourage them how the task is being performed, because you need to understand it in order to write a new software. At the end of the queries, generally ask a question like, what should I have asked else? Anything else that I should ask? And they will suggest some questions. Also make recording. I did that for several studies formally, and I am really impressed about how those workers are trying to give information about the software. You never think about it, but when you start doing experiments and when they understand that you are doing something scientific, something good, then they try to help. They try to explain problems, they try to explain the task. So they want to contribute. And that's important. You need to catch that information. For the beginning, you prepare, you understand organization policies, understand the organizational history. So try to study the organization. Try to study organization at the beginning. Prepare some questions. Also, get the permission. For some organizations, this is very difficult. For example, we did some interviews with the banks. In the bank applications, you cannot record the screen because customer information is there, KVKK is there. So you need to get some permission to make, even for the interviews, you need to get permission. Otherwise, they don't let you talk to the person. But if it's their application in many cases, then they let, but customer information is still hard to record. And try to get close contact with the users, observe and interview users in the workplace, not in somewhere else. Also, people call you back after you visit. So follow also those relationships, ask questions through emails, etc., to get more information, and also record as much as possible. Then, once you record and collect the information, you switch to the analysis part. We compile collected data in numerical, textual, and multimedia databases. So in many forms, we collect data. And in order to evaluate data, in order to understand data, we quantify data and compile statistics if there are numerical data, and try to summarize it and refine it. And you need to generate reports about it. And when you are generating reports, try to understand who is going to read it. If the developers are going to read it, customize the report. If the managers are going to read it, customize it for the managers. So same report is not valid for all the audiences and goals. And try to present findings. One of the findings that we found in one study was very simple. The screens are small in banks, whereas same screens are big in front of the developers. Developers had 27-inch screen, but people in the banks use 19-inch screen, also older screens, smaller screens. So what developer think is not valid in the bank office because screens are smaller. So designer and the user are disconnected with a very simple screen size parameter. So that was a finding, simple finding, but it was very important. How do you fix it? Either by bigger screens for the branch offices in the banks, or force developers to test their application, design their application with a small screen. So screen size is 19 is fine as long as the designer knows about it. So one important strategy is we name affinity diagram. That is putting what we know and then organize on the board or somewhere on the table. So write down each observation, write down each thing that you come up, you remember in a small paper, put it on the table and group them based on their relation. Give names to the groups, so that will create a hierarchy. That hierarchy will be used to design the application with these notions. This is one example. We observe the tasks. We wrote down items that are related to tasks, and then we organize them, give names to the headings, and that will create the functions. That will create the functions in the application. So this is how we design application. Can we do it with the computer? Yes, but the tool must be quite flexible. Writing down with the paper is more challenging and interesting because many people can collaborate. You can drink coffee. You can talk about it, come back later. So it is not as limiting as a computer screen. It is more easy to work, actually. If you don't like the item, you just take it and throw it. If you want a new item, just write it and put it on a paper. So if you want to change the location, put it to this different location by hand. Obviously, that can be done with the computer, but not as successful. This is the close-up. As an alternative for simpler projects, you can write down the board, but when you write down the board, you are hesitant to change the location. Location changing becomes difficult, so you tend to connect it with the arrows. And as things becomes complicated, arrows gives you trouble. But this is also doable, and this is doable for the version 2, for example, when you did the first part and when you are focusing on hierarchies in the later stages, this can be done as well. So it helps designer to gain rich and true assessment of user needs, define requirements, and gives understanding about users' jobs, discover things that are outside of job description or documentation. There are things that you never seen in the field. You never seen in the documentation in the field. And these structuring allows we play the role of the end user. We can sit in when real users are not available and play with it. Discussion as open-ended and unbiased discussion, nature of this process promotes discovery. You can discover new possibilities, new kind of tasks and products. Maybe you can offer a different service based on your analysis. So new services and products can be discovered. The analysis can be in two ways. You can make it descriptive or measurement based. You can observe habits, patterns, etc., or how often was done, what percent, how many times, etc. So you can measure it. Measuring is more satisfying for the managers. If there is a resistance, if it is not only for you, if there is a resistance by the developers, then those resistances can be eliminated by measured variables. So quantitative analysis of data is more convincing to resistive developers. These ethnographic observation studies and interviews have some drawbacks. One is the time. It takes time. May take a couple of days, weeks, or months. Only a small number of participants participate. If they are biased, then you take the bias. Results are generally qualitative, and explanation is somewhat difficult. You learn a lot of things, but when people say, what did you learn? You can't tell. Because many things are difficult to explain and write down, or not written down, you forget about it. However, as you design your application, these ethnographic study helps developer significantly, because in many steps they will remember how the task is being done, and they will adjust their dialogues, menus, and functions accordingly. This kind of ethnographic study is a skill, so you need to be experienced on that. It's not like a mathematics, you solve it or not. You need to be experienced observer in order to be able to observe and measure these factors. So we do it over and over and over to get more experience. If we do this continuously and with the informed way, as the system is being developed, you keep doing this. And that is a structure in user-centered design. Throughout the design, you go back and watch. You go back and watch and see the responses. That requires coordination, a lot of time, but the end product will be very nice. Thinking out loud is one critical method. Sitting the user, doing activity together, encouraging the user to talk about what is happening, whether he or she likes it, whether there is a problem, what is she doing now, what are the difficulties, can it be better? So, talkative job doing. Video and audio is recorded. Some users cannot talk. Some users talk too much. So not everyone is very good at this. You can't do it all the time. You can do it maybe half an hour for one task performance. But for doing things like sending money to somebody else or opening an account in the bank, these things can be explained as they are doing verbally, and those verbal sound and content is recorded. Therefore, it will help a lot in doing, especially if you are going to develop a totally new application to a place where no computer is involved. For example, a distribution center for the vegetables, hal, or school bicycle center, where there is no computerized method, but there are records in the paper and the keys, tags. So obviously there is a methodology, but in order to understand what kind of methodology is in place now, they talk about what they are doing as they are doing. So that is what we say thinking out loud method. Or you can critic the application together. İki kişi beraber vurabilirsiniz yani uygulamaya. So user is then viewed as a collaborator of evaluation rather than the subject. So it's kind of against the application, but in order to criticize and find the flaws, find the bad parts of the existing version, and when you are trying to develop a new version, it's a good strategy. Evaluator and participant can ask each other questions, so they are using it together, okay, with talking too. They evaluate together by using it. So if it's an early prototype, it's a very good. Experimenter uses tasks, also talks to participant through the experiment. They are more open, and at the end there is a discussion which we call debriefing at the end. We also record them. It could be structured. If it is structured, it will be efficient, and it's good for training. If it is unstructured, then it will be inefficient. Training requires if it is inefficient, process plus domain knowledge. It could be semi-structured, doing some things with the rules, with the guides, and then leave it alone. It starts with focused questions and move to the open-ended discussion. Usually that is what we prefer. Do some structured talk, then move openly criticizing with the interview. That is how generally interview about the user, about the application is done. The example is how do you perform the task? Why do you perform? Under what conditions do you perform? What do you use to do this? How do you do it? How do you do it? When do you do it? So these kind of questions are good questions and must be planned. And there are open-ended questions like how do you do it? Please explain how you do it. Please explain. Is there anything that we can do other than this? So these questions are open-ended questions, which gives additional chance for the user to give more feedback. Forward. Please show me the results of doing this, and do errors ever occur when doing this? How do you discover the errors, etc. Also, allow them to talk about something else. Maybe it's important. And the last question should be, what else should I have asked you? This part, observation part, is finished. Second part, any questions so far? Bugün markete gittiğinizde kasiyeri inceleyin. Ellerini, okuttuğu şeyleri, ekranı ne yapıyor inceleyin. Acaba ekstradan bir fonksiyon var mı? Optimize edilecek, iyileştirilebilecek bir yer var mı? Ne düşünüyorsunuz? Yapamadığında nasıl yapamıyor bazı şeyleri? Ne olmuyor da bazı şeyler yürümüyor? Bunlara bir bakarsınız. Özellikle yazar kasalarda çok sıkıntı yok ama Migros gibi yerlerde çünkü çok optimize edilmiş. Giyim mağazalarının interface'leri ya da restoranların interface'leri tam optimize edilmemiş olabiliyor. Oralarda behavior'ı incelediğinizde adamın neyi yapamadığını az çok çıkarabiliyorsunuz. Neden olduğunu anlayabiliyorsunuz. Second big part is domain expert interviews. Domain expert interviews describes how it should be done, how the task should be done, not necessarily how it is done, but they are expert in the domain and they know how it should be done correctly. Maybe things are not done correctly. So talking about domain experts gives you some idea about what is the 100% correct case is. It could not be achievable, or it could be something like this other than the straight way, but that is what the legislator or domain expert talks. Generally, we make questions to ask at the end of the study. And these questions are usually have completely disagree, strongly agree. So we call them Likert scale. These question forms are usually asked with the check marks. You can do this online as well, but please do it with 1 or 2 people before asking these questions to everybody. Usually, there will be errors, there will be corrections. So try to do it with someone else other than you to go through the questions, and you will realize that there will be errors in most cases. The Likert scale is one famous scale. Likert scale is either from 1 to 7 or 1 to 5. Keep in mind that these are odd numbers, 5 or 7, because if you want to choose the one in the middle, that will be neither that nor the other side. So neither satisfied nor unsatisfied. Also, you can use the words, you can play with the words, strongly agree, neutral disagree, strongly agree. But be careful about not guiding, not forcing the user to select good things about the software. Because what you are trying to do is to discover problems, not to eliminate, not to stop problems being talked. So, not to cover problems. We do experiments and interviews to uncover problems, not to cover problems. That's important. And people say this is, and at the end rank the importance of each tasks, list the 4 most important tasks we perform, list the pieces of information you need to have before making decision about X. So these are the questions that we can ask in addition to the other questions. And as I said, are there any points you'd like to make at the end? Opinions. That's it. So nothing else can be done by observing and doing experiment, doing interviews, doing cooperative education, thinking out loud with the users. You can do this in the laboratory, but going to the actual place, actual setting, if such a place exists, is better. In some applications, original place doesn't exist yet, then you do it in the laboratory with potential users. Next technique is the focus group. The focus group technique is run on the individuals of number 3 to 10. So a table, a meeting table, T's come. We use several different groups with different roles or perspectives and separate the powerful from those who are not. It's important because some people are more important than others. And if more important person says, I didn't like this part, others cannot talk. In a focus group, it's a more democratic. We try to make it democratic. Everybody should talk about something and can complain, can give suggestions about the application, about the task, about the company. So whatever focus group is trying to achieve, try to democratize it. So too much powerful people can influence the direction of the talk, such as rector, for example. If rector is there among the others, So if he says something, usually, not all the time, usually others remain silent because they don't want to talk. Therefore, try to make it equal as possible so that, or explain it at the beginning that everybody is equal now, you can talk. Then they start talking, and take a video recording. And there is a moderator. Moderator guides the way of the discussion. Otherwise, people talk about the weather. People talk about how the Turkey is going in which direction in the meeting. So it doesn't help. There is a moderator. A moderator will moderate and ask questions and stimulate the discussion on the table. It is relatively low cost, very helpful, quick way to learn a lot of things from the field. If you are developing an application for, one of my students is developing a software for the student clubs in the university. Asare Hoca students, there are two students. One of them is Süleyman, if he is here. They are developing student club application. And one important thing is if you can gather students, student club members, student registration office workers, some other managerial person in the university. So if you can bring them on the table, let them talk about what is necessary, what is not necessary, and record it. It gives a lot of information in a 2-hour meeting. And that is quite helpful and low cost. You learn a lot of things in such meetings. We call these as focus groups. A moderator should moderate it so that the intended topic is talk. Also allow some digressions, but not that much, of course. Last thing is the studying documentation. If there is legislation, kanun, etc., yönetmelik, study that so that it's like talking to the expert about the domain. And that documentation contains rules. Those rules often describe how things should be done rather than how they are done. They try to understand why not done by the book. So as we try to understand what to do in our software, try to understand functions, we also look at the other products. We do examine the functions, which functions are available with the competitive product, which functions are available with our design. So in terms of functions and also style, how you organize things, making our application slightly similar to the other applications in the market helps people transfer their skills to our application, but also eliminates possibility of people switching to your application, looking for new look and feel and new way of doing it. So you need to have a balance. You need to be slightly different, but not much different, because if you are too different, people cannot switch to your product. So it depends what you are developing. If it's a competitive product, switching is an issue. If it is one of a kind product, then the things that you do in the interface should be similar to the other tasks generally, so that people will learn it easily. Generally, I am going to show you which methods to use. Trying to get information from the users. Sometimes, for example, context prevents video recording, or talking out loud is impossible due to external factors. But one way or another, observation is required in any case. Organizing the information that we collect, comparing the notes that we take, either with the papers or with the tools, with the computer tools, such as this. So just writing down information that we observe and examining it on the table. This is what we call card sorting. And card sorting will create affinity diagrams later. It's also good for website design. What to put where? Questions will be answered. But try to do it with the multiple users, not only one person. This is one example with the card sorting through the interview groups. So then you can put it down like this. This used to be the affinity diagram in designing the WordPerfect. It's from the book. What else? Computerized tools can be used. Workflow diagrams, flowcharts. There are software for card sorting and flowcharts and task analysis diagramming. These design tools are available online and as a standalone applications lately. You can use these tools to organize the information about tasks so that you can move to requirement analysis. The typical task analysis talks about what is going to be done and why are we doing it, and what is the outcome, so utility of it, what are the resources you use, etc. So in order to do that, first we need to go to their environment, as we say, and let me go forward. Yes. So one thing we know is the use case. Listing down use cases. Doing this, doing this, doing this, doing this. So those are the main functions. Second, user characteristics like personas. Persona is the characteristics of the user, such as the bank employee is going to use. So you try to describe what kind of bank employee is, how old is she, how old is he, and is there any foreign language capability, English language capability? How about the eyes? So all of them are personas. We outline the task. We can explain it. And number 5 is interesting. I am going to go to that. Hierarchical task analysis and network diagrams. One of them is entity relationship diagrams, ER diagrams that we do in databases class, or the diagrams more hierarchical in tree fashion, hierarchical task analysis. So dividing the big task into multiple tasks and number them. If it is workflow oriented, it is more flow oriented. Flow chart is more suitable. Some applications are flow based, such as shopping. Some applications are hierarchical because you have many choices. Each choice leads to other choices. So it's more like tree. But some others, like online education, you sign up, enter your information, enter the next page, next page, next page, and finish. So it's more like a flowchart. Essential use case means description. What is the task, what the user wants, and what system should do. This gives you an idea about how am I going to organize the interface. That is what we call scenario. An example is arrange a meeting. I want to arrange a meeting, and system should request meeting attendees and constraints. Identify meeting attendees and constraints, suggest potential dates by the system, choose preferred date that the user is going to do it, and the system will book the meeting, send the messages, etc. So this is how meeting set by the calendar should function. This is a scenario. It could be in table form, tabular form. Login, select currency required, enter amount of currency, confirm, take money and go. So this is typical ATM application. And user's purpose is on one side, system responsibility is on the other side. So this will decompose the task and write down what the necessary steps, what the necessary not steps, what the necessary things are. And about the persona, it is kind of interesting from the book of Copper. ATM users. One persona generation is youngs, middle age, olders. Physical limitations are different with youngs. Educational backgrounds are different. Computer use is different. Motivation and attitude. So these are different with all different types of users. So you should write down these characteristics when developing personas. So then realize that your interface is maybe not suitable for this part. Then you will make modifications in your design so that that kind of users are also included. This is one teenager, this is another Sandra, and this is Grandpa Marvin. So these kind of persona descriptions can help you to understand certain things. For example, with this one, because she has a child, she prefers to go in the shopping center because in the shopping center, child is more easy to manage. She cannot use the ATM machine in the outside because there is a kid. So when we try to outline the tasks, we can use matrix, we can use lists, we can use tables, lists, numbered lists, etc. Try to organize it. There is no standard method. But going from top to down, name the big task first, then describe it, decompose it in the sub items. For sequential tasks, outlining items is better, but if it is parallel tasks and branching, you need to move forward to flowcharts because there's branching. If else things happen, branching. So this is what an outline is. Lawn mower to cut grass. This is again from the book. Examine the lawn, inspect the lawnmower, and then check engine oil level, etc., etc. So each step can further decomposed into sub-steps, but there's no jump. Okay, so if you can, but if number of jumps are becoming too much, then you need to do something else. You need to make a flowchart rather than description as a list. You can just describe. Just writing down is even enough. It's more effective for communicating a general idea of the task. It's a basically outline with the paragraph. Not effective for details, branching. For branching, it's very bad. With the list, you can even put arrows or go to step 6, but in the paragraph, it becomes hard to understand. But it is great for introduction to diagrams and outlines as a paragraph explaining to the boss, this is how it is going to be used. So writing down is essential. And I want you to write down your narratives in the graduate projects so that you and evaluator, examiner, anybody who reads it can understand how it is going to be used at the beginning. You need to understand how it is going to be used in order to program it. That should come first. The famous one is the HTA, hierarchical task analysis, or some people say hierarchical task decomposition. It focuses on goals, tasks, and subtasks. Basically, the lowest elements in the subtasks are user interface counterparts. It's a graphical representation. It's organized into plans. There are plans, plan A, plan B, plan C. I'm going to show you. For example, accident investigation for insurance company. So conduct an accident investigation, collect evidence, then analyze facts, then so 1, 2, 3 are steps. 1, collect evidence. 2, analyze facts. 3, integrate facts. 4, validate. 5, recommendations. Fine, but collecting evidence is more critical and has subtasks. So subtasks are walk to accident site, identify 1, 2, 3, 4. Interview witnesses. That is interesting. So that has subtasks. Establish meeting room, state the purpose, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there are also plans, different scenarios. So different scenarios can branch to different locations. So there could be some digressions. Staying same task can be done with multiple methods. So those are the plans. Some of them are fixed. This one is done, this one is done, this one is done, this one is done. In the optional tasks, there is if, sometimes done, sometimes not, sometimes until something happens. So it is like a clock set iterations, time sharing, or optional. So these are the task clusters. Some of them are optional, some of them are cyclers. So write down if there is such. This is again example, borrowing a book from the library. This is our main task. Then first step is the going to the library. This line says it is finished. Then find the book. It's not finished. Retrieve the book from the shelf and take the book to the counter and finished. But this can continue with more details. Access to catalog, access to search screen, enter search criteria, find it, and once you finish 2.5, then you move to 3. So this is how hierarchical task analysis is done. It is usually asked in the exam. Writing a letter. Write a letter, get supplies, write the actual letter, prepare envelope, prepare mail, get address, apply stamp, insert letter, seal envelope, find address book, find address. So sometimes get envelope, paper, pencil, stamp, write letter, address the envelope, apply stamp, put letter in envelope, seal. Sometimes put the address first, write the letter later. So this can change order. Apply step, put the letter in envelope. This also can change. So application of the steps can vary. And this can accommodate it. So those are different plans. Okay. Another arrange a meeting is here. Then this is arrange a meeting, compile meeting attendees, list of meeting constraints, find a suitable date, enter meeting into calendars, inform meeting attendees, inform departmental dates, etc. So this one can be expanded, but others are steps. Also, there is a discretionary 2 choices. Not all of them are strictly required. Also, repeat actions can be written down here. It is kind of different from flowcharts because in the flowcharts, it is more machine algorithm oriented. This is more abstraction oriented. What are the main things? So trying to understand the task, not how the computer is going to follow. If you draw the flowchart, you are more going to the direction of the computer algorithm. So repeat 2, 3. The shape of the analysis reflects how computer is going to behave rather than how user is perceiving the task. This is more explaining how user is seeing the task in abstract way. Or you can write entity relationship diagrams like the databases, objects and people, links to related objects, and actions are written on the road on the arrows. So it's like state transition diagrams. simple drawing system. Objects are the page, line, point. Relations are page contains 0 or more lines and points. Lines defined by 2 points. 2 points define line. So those are the relation between 2 points. Actions like clear, create, delete, move. Those are the actions. So files like text editor, files, lines, characters, sequence of lines. Line is a sequence of characters. So a combination of objects can create relations. Actions are create file, delete file, etc. So those are the object, action, entity relationship diagram. So how am I going to draw it? Actions, objects, and relations, such as object is pen, attribute is color, writing, on, off. So those are the attributes. So we are moving to object-oriented design and encapsulating the functions of the objects and relations into functions in the object-oriented design. Actor is Mary. Actions is make a sketch, organize meeting. So M1 and M2 are functions of the actor. So flowchart can help if there is state transition significantly, such as start, continue, document, manual operation, input, display, end. So if this kind of state transition is important in the task, go for this flowchart. Flowchart is good because we also computer scientists and we are familiar with the flowcharts. Therefore, it helps all the people understand what's going to happen. It's a good way of explaining the task. Later, the workflow. This is what workflow is. It's a special case of the flowchart, oriented to the work rather than the algorithm. Algorithm can have flowchart itself, or work has flowchart itself. They look like each other, but they're kind of different. Workflow chart focuses on not the algorithms or modules, it is focuses on steps of the operation. Somebody asks for the travel, then somebody says, okay, you can go, and somebody purchases ticket, and ticket is paid, and then it is given to the person. So this is the workflow. The manager approves it, etc. That is what we call workflow. If the task contains workflow, it's in a business environment, this is the way to go. It could be more complicated than this, similar to entity relationship diagram and workflow together. So there is no single way of doing the analysis. Depending on what the important parts are coming forward, just play with how you draw it. But please draw it and spend some time on it. Okay, if we summarize, we need to gather data, we represent tasks and subtasks, and we draw the hierarchical tree. But try to be efficient. You can, but you should not do unnecessary steps. If the steps are too obvious, don't make it expand. Only expand the ambiguous, interesting things. If the steps are obvious, then you don't need to expand them. like picking the book from the shelf. Obviously, picking the book from the shelf requires your arm to go up and grab. If it's a robotics application, picking the book from the shelf is important. But if it is not an robotics application, if the person is going to pick the book from the shelf, you don't need to give details. Some people have low motivation and optional use of the application. In that case, our target must be easy to learn. Our application should be easy to learn. If the person has low motivation, like bank worker, but you have to use it, then the application should give control and power to the user. That increases the motivation. So it increases the motivation in the second one. In the first one, motivation is low and usage is also optional. They may not do it. Then ease of learning is important. If the motivation is high due to fear, you have to use it. You have to do it, such as you are going to apply for TOG. Then ease of learning, robustness, and control is the goal. High motivation, but only for the interest. Then power is important and easy to use. These are design goals depending on who the user is. If the experience of the user is low, if the experience of the user with the system is also low, inexperienced users, you need to give prompts. Evet efendim, sepet efendim, şimdi girin efendim, çıkın efendim, etc. So you need to give prompts. If the experience of the task is high, like a banking employee, high experience with the task, and also high experience with the system, then efficient commands, brief syntax is the goal. If the experience with the task is low, you don't know how to use stock exchange, but you are good with computers, then help is important. If the experience with the task is high, if you are stock exchange employee, but no experience with the system, syntactic prompting, syntax prompting, explaining this is going to be done this way is syntactic prompting. Semantic prompting also explains maybe you want to do this, and if you want to do this, please go to etc. So semantic prompts are more explanatory. Syntactic prompts are only showing the direction because the person is already have some experience with the task, not the system although. I think we can stop here for this week and continue next week from where we leave. If you have any questions, let me know. I am stopping recording now.